So I want to talk about a controversial issue, which is foreign aid. And this was a question that came up with the Tory leadership candidate Esther McVey. She is known for taking quite a hard line on this. I think she makes some valid points about countries that, for example, can afford space programs. Specifically thinking of India here, yet we still give them millions in foreign aid. Um, I want to say from the outset, I think that there is, I think it's just disingenuous to argue anyone who says that charity begins at home, therefore we cannot help poor foreigners. That's a disingenuous argument. We are the world's sixth biggest economy, so it's not a case that if we have foreign aid, that means we cannot help and prioritize the most vulnerable at home. For example, the homeless. Veterans, etc., people who I think most people would recognize the government needs to look after. There is a serious homelessness problem in this country, not helped by Tory austerity. But I think there are some right wingers who try to make it about, oh, well, the poor foreigners or the foreigners are the problem. There is a slightly jingoistic element to this. And I'm suspicious of people who always come out with charity begins at home. I think that if you really push them, now some of them might work in the charity sector, but I do wonder how many of them actually really care about Britain's homeless, for example, or if they're just using it as a way to bash foreign aid. It's understandable that there's a lot of controversies connected around foreign aid. It's understandable that people are cynical about it. Back in 1984, when Bob Geldof organised the Live Aid, Band Aid, which then became Live Aid the following year, there were criticisms that a lot of that money went to the Ethiopian militia regime at the time rather than to famine relief. We all know the scandals around UN food programs and indeed Oxfam, which was an organisation I volunteered with for a while. I still believe that it was a case of bad people infiltrating Oxfam rather than Oxfam being a bad organisation. Um, I think there are right wingers who, if they had their way, there would be zero foreign aid. Now, I don't agree with that, and this is why. Every country in the world has obligations on this, particularly developed countries. So let's say, for instance, there's a big typhoon hits the Philippines and thousands of people are killed. The idea that we don't provide humanitarian assistance or aid for something like that, to me, is just callous. It's just not workable. I do think it's legitimate to put more scrutiny on foreign aid, and I do think that countries that like to point fingers at Britain, shame Britain because of a colonial past, also need to be reminded we have given millions and millions to developing countries over the years. This is a fact. Um, so it's right that we put national interests first, but I don't think that means simply cutting off foreign aid. And I do not accept this argument. It's one or the other. I.e., if we give foreign aid, then we cannot help our own. I think that's a very cynical and misleading argument. Um, There is no reason why we cannot help the most vulnerable in our society and have a foreign aid program. Should foreign aid be scaled back? I think in some cases perhaps it should. I mean, countries that whose politicians like to constantly Britain shame, we need to be saying, well, look, we're giving you this money. We're fulfilling our obligations as a developed country, but there should be caveats. Where is this money going? India, for example, British Indian relations are very important. You know, there's a significant amount of the Indian diaspora in Britain, and we obviously have historic ties. But it is true that India has a space program, and India spends a lot of money on vanity statues, on honoring Indian nationalist leaders. India still has chronic poverty. So it is a legitimate question to ask where this money is going. And Indian politicians shouldn't be getting defensive about that. Um, So I'm not naive. I do think that there should be strong caveats with foreign aid, but I don't agree with those who think we should just cut it off completely. Um, I don't think that's a way forward. It's a complex subject. There's a lot of things to look at. But I'm skeptical of people who come out with this, oh, charity begins at home. I want to say to them, well, okay, what are you doing about the homelessness problem in Britain? Are you volunteering in a homeless shelter? Are you doing something to help that situation? I think it's just a disingenuous and cynical argument to say, well, in order to help a homeless British person or a British veteran or a British carer or someone like that, then we need to deny some poor farmer in Ethiopia or some fisherman in Bangladesh, you know, just ignore our moral commitments to helping developing countries. And I do believe, I appreciate people might disagree with this, but I do believe that developed rich countries have an obligation to help the poorest in the world. People could say what they want about that, but I think that is the case. So, what I would conclude is foreign aid definitely needs to be reviewed. I think people have legitimate concerns about where money goes. Um, and there are other issues that need to be addressed. Overpopulation is a major issue. It's the elephant in the room, and we need to be very candid about issues around that. But I do not agree with those who say that the answer is just to cut off all foreign aid. I think that's a very callous and jingoistic approach to things. I just don't think it's the way forward. It's certainly not a way for Britain to show leadership in the world. Um, British aid, the fact of the matter is, British aid does help millions of people. So we hear of the scandals, and it's fair enough that those are controversial and they're reported, and heads roll over it. People have to resign and so on. But I don't agree with this overly cynical thing that it's all bad. British aid does make a difference to millions of lives, and I'm proud of that, frankly.